thanks, Tom. And those that are not active in Mathematic, strong recommendation to consider. Is this too loud, Rye, or is this okay? Strong recommendation to consider becoming a member. From a legacy perspective, it's been magical over the years. I think over the next year or two, Tom's bringing in some new perspective energy. So if you're not currently a member, please, please, please go to your company, ask for the investment, and work the hell out of the investment, because I think it's the best bargain in the country right now in regards to networking and learning. It's always fun for me to come to Boston. This is really where TMG, the Mullings Group, was built. In 89, 90, as Tom said. We have probably done hundreds of placements up here with hundreds of companies, small startups, large emerging technologies. My request today on the talent acquisition side is to keep an open mind. What I'm going to share with you has not been shared before. This has been developed over 27 years, but especially refined over the last 2 years. So I'm super excited to release this here in Boston. And I do believe, and this is a heck of a statement, I do believe this is going to reformat the talent acquisition landscape. But again, it requires an open mind to just consider and not try and overlay it over your existing system. Deal? Okay. And I want questions. You can stop me in the middle. If I can answer the question right then, I absolutely will. If I ask you to hold it until another point as I share the information, there's a reason for it. Okay? So as Tom had mentioned, a little background on our firm. I've been at this since actually '89. Our firm, just to put some scale and scope, we've got more than $80 million in search fees exclusively in the medtech industry. We've dealt with 5,000 placements, hundreds of companies, startups, large, well-established. We're just coming off of a very large project with Google and J&J. 27 firms interviewed, 1 selected. I'll share some details with that. That was sort of the genesis of this concept, and it translates very well to very small emerging technology companies up through the giants. So after all this time, our firm has become experts on why people make moves. And that's where I think you have to start when you consider triggering somebody's interest in your organization. You have to understand what it is that's motivating them and why it is they're going to make the decision to at least lean in and consider your company. I did not say take the offer, because there's too many times that we put the focus on taking the offer versus getting people engaged first. And then we're going to talk about what A players look for. All organizations are made up of a number of players, just like if you're a Pats fan, I'm going to guess we have a couple in the room here. Just like the Pats have 50-something players on the team, and they're all super good at what they do, there were 3 or 4 players that seem to always make a difference in the big game. And everybody has their favorites, but there are 3 or 4 A players that constantly move that ball literally and figuratively over the line. And we understand what it is that gains their attention, and we understand what it is that makes them make the decision to make the move. In theory, the search business should not work. There's a number of people in here that I've placed in their career, or my firm has. Put your hands up. Right? There's a couple people in here, and there's others that I've done work for. Put your hands up, right? So in theory, I did not know any of those individuals before we placed them. I was a voice on the phone. I was a stranger. I asked them to leave work one day, go meet somebody, take an interview, go on the phone call, in some instances sell their house, get their sig other to move to Florida, pull the kids out of school for 5% increase. Actually, you got more than that, but for a 5% increase. Okay? I mean, that in theory should not work. I'm a stranger. And over time, we develop a relationship, and of course it works, and we'll explain why later. But when you look at why that works, that leads you down the path of what I'm going to show you today can be scaled out because of the use of technology in a very efficient way. And I'm not talking about use of technology just spam botting everybody, but a new mindset of figuring out how to get somebody's attention and then convert that attention. A players, in general, do not answer blind ads. Their head is down, busy working. They are not scanning want ads. They are usually the people who are solving the toughest problems in the organization. They are not spending nights or weekends looking at your postings, every single one of you put out on the internet. They don't. So if 90% of A players have told our firm that we've solicited that they do not blindly send a resume into an ad or a company, yet that is the primary strategy of every single organization sitting in here today, does that make sense? How many HR people do I have in here today? By the way, I'm your friend, I promise. Because I'm going to give you some information to take back to your leadership to ask them to consider. So let's just make that early before you stand there going like this and evaluating. I'm your friend because I'm going to give you tools to make your job more effective when bringing in people. Deal? Okay. So what we've got to do is we've got to develop a brand new point of view. I asked you in the beginning to just consider looking at your talent acquisition in a way that if you had a clean slate, you would absolutely start anew in a new environment with new technology in new ways, because everybody sitting in here highly likely is just laying over how you've done it for 20, 30, 40 years, your firm has, and now all you're doing is amplifying the wrong approach via a digital application. That's all you're doing. You have not looked at the core base of the work and what problem you're trying to solve. What you're trying to do is throw more power in the wrong direction, and you're amplifying the white noise that's in the marketplace. That's all you're doing. So I want you to have a POV, a point of view here, and understand that how you look at talent today needs to be stunningly different than the way you were doing it yesterday. We've all heard our CEOs say, people are our #1 asset. People win games for us. And I agree with that. Yet most of the time, they don't map their behaviors or their tactics to finding the best people. Yet they hold their technology up on a platform and then eventually try and bring the right people in to hold that technology up. When it should be the other way around. Your time should be spent exclusively on finding the A players, because we've all been part of organizations that have had fantastic technologies, but the team couldn't get it over the line. And then we've had average technologies that have gotten A players get that technology over the line. I've seen that in the transaction in the VC business a lot. You've seen it a lot too, haven't you? In your seat. So technologies don't win the game. Talent does. And that talent acquisition strategy always has to start at the top. I was having a conversation with a friend before here, and I said, let's talk about your talent acquisition. And I said, it starts at the top. And by reflex, the person said, well, it's actually like in the middle management. They're not spending enough time to get the things done. I'm suggesting that if your CEO and your president rewarded activity that mapped towards talent acquisition as a primary deliverable, a KPI, it would change the behavior of the organization dramatically. However, most CEOs and most presidents have zero training on TA, on talent acquisition. When they sit in their strategy meetings every year, and their regulatory and their clinical and their sales and their marketing teams are sitting there, and they're asked, those individuals, those leaders are asked to, with a granular fashion, demonstrate their strategy, and then the CEO picks that apart. My HR people, does your CEO pick your strategy apart down to a granular level other than asking what's the budget and how many postings are we going to put out? A little more, but I'm being a little facetious. But do they ask with the same rigor as they do the other functions we spoke at? So think about that for a second. The role that's responsible for bringing in the people that are setting your strategy for all your other functional roles has no deep strategy. Let that sink in just for a second. It's profound. When you have a CEO who will evaluate how you do business today, in the theater you do business today, that's when the shift occurs. Communication right now is at an all-time, the friction in communication is at an all-time low. We know that because of what? The internet and all the job boards. So you've got all kinds of information going on out there, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, etc. All of these platforms are allowing people to fabricate an enormous amount of white noise. And again, I'm talking about that in general, but let's just focus on the talent acquisition field. Postings, static postings, are the primary strategy of most organizations. And that's contributing to the massive amount of white noise. And what that white noise is doing is creating a numbness in the candidate field, especially the A players. And what you really need to do, and why my business works as a headhunter, is I create a signal that gets above that white noise. Think about the physics for a second. I'm just going to come back to common sense today. When you get stumped on an opportunity, or you have a key role in particular that you have to fill, what do? You call a headhunter after everything else is exhausted, generally. And what do? We call in the same exact market you were advertising. We're pitching the same exact job that you were advertising. We're calling the same candidates that you had access to with your postings. We're not paying any more money for the position than you are. Yet, a good search firm gets the individual when you couldn't, in the same pond you were fishing. Does anybody understand why?
Volume. You got 10 recruiters calling in the market. You only got one corporate recruiter. That's 10 times more calls in the market.
It's a possibility, yes. It's not the answer, but it's a possibility. Howard?
The relationship that you build.
Relationship, that's one of them. What we do is we create a signal with our outbound call that taps the individual on the shoulder who was not looking. Dave, Howard, Anthony, they were working away at their desk, not looking at the want ads. The phone rang. I created a signal above that white noise that said, hey, let's pause for a second. I've got something you need to hear about. It's the same job that you had posted, but those A players were not fishing in the pond where your postings were. So in an analog fashion, on a one-to-one basis, one phone call, one pickup, one phone call, one pickup, we created a very strong signal that raised an awareness above the white noise to create trading of information, the lean-in of the individual, giving them a safe place to converse with us, potentially engage with more information, and then bring them into the process. That's all we do as headhunters. There's nothing magical about it. There's no secret file cabinet we have. There's not 10 headhunters calling in our firm. There's one, because I'd go out of business if I had 10 guys calling on one. What we're creating, what's that?
You're rare. A lot of your competitors have a group of people hitting the market hard.
Absolutely, and they're creating a lot of noise in there too. And again, they're just adding to the noise that is causing a lot of the distractions in the business and the numbing. What we've come up with is a way to digitally storytell a 2-person startup up to a 15,000 person corporate organization. What we do is we digitally storytell. Somebody use 3 words or 4 words and tell me what LinkedIn is, beside garbage.
Global professional network.
Global professional network.
Yeah, business network.
Business network.
Yeah, so say the same thing.
Business network. Rolodex? Yeah, job board, right? Yeah, 21st century Rolodex. Really, in my opinion, our firm's opinion, it is the most amazing marketing tool of all time for employment. Yet very few people hack it that way. It is not a job board. It is not a Rolodex. It is a platform to deploy your story amongst 350 million worldwide, and I'm not an advertisement for LinkedIn, guys, because in 3 years it'll be somebody else when they blow it. But it is a platform to deploy your story on, your hiring narrative to the marketplace. If you type in Massachusetts medical, I believe you get 25,000 candidates. If you add biotech to that, you get 50,000 candidates. That's a lot of people to market to, right in your sweet spot. Now, it's what you say is the difference, because how you chat with those candidates is the key. There are 3 types of candidates in the market. There's the candidate, and we all know them. If they get a call or they see an opening, it's, yes, I'm in. In fact, when you shake their hand, they probably hand you their resume at the same time, right? I was chatting with somebody else earlier today, and they said we've got director searches out, and every time the director search goes out on the internet, the same 4 people send the resume in. And my guess is they're unemployed. And that's nothing wrong, because my heart goes out to the unemployed. And we've placed more unemployed people in the last 4 years than ever before in 27 years, and there's great people unemployed, but you know what I mean. There are serial shoppers for jobs. And generally speaking, they're not the A player. You've got the no thanks. Those are the people that are just not going to move. And it's important that you understand these 3 buckets. The no thanks is either for personal or professional reasons they can't move, or a family reason, or they're waiting for a year-end bonus that's just too massive, or there's a challenge in the family. It can't happen. And then there's the it depends. And everybody sitting in this room is in it depends. This is where the A players sit. It depends on a number of things. But the A player who's not looking will always take a new job when the it depends matches with what they're looking for. A players find their jobs 3 ways. I want to run through this because I don't want to lose a lot of time on this, but they run it in 3 ways. The first way they find their job is through a colleague. My HR people, your strategy here generally are, let's get the postings out, cool, let's get them out. Then the person who has the staked interest in the hire gets up and pulls up their Rolodex and calls the people they know. Hello, Susie, it's Bob. Listen, I got a VP of marketing, big launch, Europe. Are you interested? No, I'll leave Boston side, come here, this is a good company. Right? That's what you do, because you've got gravitas with that person, a relationship with that person, which leads to coffee. And coffee leads to a TI, a telephone interview. And then that leads to an offer. And the person wasn't looking, but the A player got a signal above the noise, a signal above the generic job posting. That's one way. Second way is the headhunter. Howard, I think you mentioned that. The headhunter has a relationship with you. They trust each other. You know what we're looking for. Keep me in mind. If something comes up, give me a ring. Or a stranger the first time, but the person does such a good job of representing your organization, the person goes, hold on a second. And then usually what happens, I hear a couple footsteps, and I hear the door close. And you come back to your desk, and I got you. I got you to deliver my message, is what I have you on. If the position's no good, or I don't map to what you're looking for, we at least have a relationship. But that's the second way. Third way is happenstance. You're at a trade show, and this has happened to every single one of you. You're at a trade show, you're walking down the aisle, you see a technology, you're like, Or you're reading a magazine, or you see an article, but you run across it. And then what do? You start investigating. Again, another signal. But that's the 3 ways that the A player finds their next gig. And those are who you're looking for. They generally do not find it in a posting. The first thing that you need to do is get their attention. The A player will get the attention those 3 ways. That's typically up to date how we've gotten them. And you want to deploy your hiring narrative. Make sure you hear that word hiring. Too many organizations deploy their product narrative. We are the best, insert medical device here. They don't deploy their hiring narrative. I would say right now in Boston, I'm a little biased on this because I'm a big fan of Mike's. I would say right now, keep your eyes on Abiomed. Abiomed right now is being very bright about what they're doing. They're deploying a hiring narrative across LinkedIn that is talking about, sure, their product is placed in there, but they're talking about the culture. They're talking about the lives they're saving. They're featuring and highlighting the people whose lives have been saved and changed because of what goes on in the walls. And then subtly in there, they're sliding openings. They're copycats of mine, but that's cool. But that's what they're doing. They're deploying a hiring narrative, not a product narrative, around the organization. You do not go to work for a product. I guarantee every single one of you do not go to work for a product. You go to work for a culture. Top cultures. You don't even know what the products are half the time. Tesla, Google, Apple. They've all branded themselves as fantastic places to work, whether it's true or not. You have a hiring narrative in your head about what it's like to walk around Google. The Google organization, we do a lot of work inside the walls there now. The Google organization will interview you, make you an offer, not even tell you what you're going to work on until after you accept the offer. And then you get told what you're working on. And they can't pile up the resumes high enough. I mean, that's an obscene experience, an example, but you go to work for culture, not product. So when you develop your hiring narrative, the 4 pillars, you've got to talk about the market. And by the way, I will get this presentation out to everybody. As you can see, we're filming it online, so you don't need to take notes unless you're absolutely going to run back to your CEO today and say, I've got the answer. But your messaging needs to wrap around 4 things. One is market. Third-party, non-biased information about the market. What is the disease state that you're playing in? What's the growth of that market? There's all kinds of information. My startups can do this. My big companies already have this. What is the market that you are playing in, and what does it look like? The second thing you need is, how does your product or service answer that market need? What's unique about it? The third is the leadership. The leadership will dictate oftentimes what the culture's like in the organization. When you want to determine culture in an organization, all you need to do is go on LinkedIn or find the leadership, map up and down one level, look where they came from, and that will be a very good indicator of what the culture is like from the outside looking in. You'll determine culture as soon as you get further inside the organization, but for now, while you're doing your diligence from afar, that's the best indicator, and that's what you should authentically represent in your message. Authentically. Don't try and front something you're not, because then you have retention issues. And then 4th is mission. And mission is not that beautiful phrase you have sitting in your lobby about, I've been in J&J's lobby and I'm a big fan, and I've been in BSC's lobby and I'm a big fan, and the mission's up on the wall. But what's the mission? Why do you get up out of bed every morning, roll out of bed, and I guarantee it's not for the foosball table and the free lunch. It's the lives you're saving. It's the disease state you're conquering. Those are the things. It's the video of the person who, if not before, there was not an Impella device in that hospital in the middle of Open Zipper, Iowa, that person would have been dead. That is a mission. That is what you need to talk about. And your messaging needs to wrap up all 4 of those elegantly, because that, my friends, is the variable. Messaging is always the variable. It's the reason why I can take an opportunity, you can take an opportunity, and I'm going to beat you every time, because I spend time on the messaging to the market as to what is that individual going to get when they come in ABC company, when they come into Shire, when they come into Beaver. This is what you're going to get. I'm not going to be something you don't want. This is who we are. The messaging needs to happen in today's media-rich environment. I want to start here and get a little edgy. And stay with me here. A media-rich environment is where we play today. And sometimes that's a challenge for a lot of people. And everybody talks about the millennials, and unfortunately or fortunately, some of it's true, some of it's not. But stats-wise, they've lived their life in a media-rich environment. By 2020, 50% of the professional population will be a millennial. There was not a time in their life that they were not surgically attached to this. There was not. This is where they spend their time. Surveyed, 41% said they would prefer to get a message here on text or email than a phone call. 41%. And I bet you if I asked, and I asked for honesty here, unless you were in the middle of a deal and it was something important to you, show me your hands, turn the cameras off, show me your hands, If you had the choice of right now, get a phone call or a text to handle that was unannounced, which one do you want? Hands up. Show me text. Look around. Anthony, you're lying. Text, because you can handle it on your time. And on a text, what I'm about to show you, I can deploy my message, leave it for you, and walk away until you have time to consider it. The media-rich environment. Let me tell you what our case study is on this. So I told you earlier, Verb Surgical hired us. Verb is the love child between J&J and Google. What I'm sharing with now is all in the public domain because I'm under an NDA, and it's a big project. It's by far the most audacious medical device ever attempted in the history of the world. Big statement. When it comes out, you'll see what I mean. Audacious. $400 million initial investment, 2 monsters taking place on the grounds in Mountain View on the Google campus. We're the firm driving it. Here's the rub. I'm competing in Silicon Valley. I'm looking for the exact same people, software system, mechanical, electrical, that all the other surgical robotics like Intuitive and Auris are. Worse than that, my software engineers, controls engineers, system engineers are being offered up to 30% more compensation at Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, LinkedIn, Google. I'm competing in a market where I can't bring people in because the cost of living is too brutal. And I've got to go from 7 to 177 in less than 2 years of the highest flying individuals, and this is a huge compliment to them, that I have walked the halls in my 27 years. The intellectual horsepower in that organization is mind-bending. Here's the rub. I couldn't talk about the product. I could not talk about the robot. I still can't go into details about it. So our firm sat down 2 years ago. I know, right? 2 years ago, we sat down, how are we going to crack this nut? And we came up with this strategy. And it's a digital storytelling that wraps itself around influencing people, and it has nothing to do with product. Now, these are the other headwinds I'm against, by the way. We'll talk about narrative. Intuitive Surgical that Gary runs, brilliant man, everybody knows the win there, $24 billion market cap, the 800-pound gorilla in the surgical robotic world. They started early with their hiring narrative against Verb because they were scared poopless that there was going to be a brain drain on that, right? And then you had Auris. And so what happened is you had these other med tech companies in the area start deploying a narrative against Verb. A narrative that said, another Google moonshot. Another J&J company. J&J's never sold CapEx before. Every integration they have goes bust anyway. Reference, Cordis, Connor, right? Just go down the list. So it was easy to develop a narrative against that. I was selling against major headwinds. So we had to develop a digital storytelling platform. And on that platform, in a media-rich environment, we started deploying all kinds of content that highlighted the 4 pillars that I chatted about. Now let me back up here. A 4-person startup can do the same thing, and I'm going to tell you later exactly how. But I want you conceptually just to get this put into your brain as the way to crack the talent acquisition world. We have video on leadership. We have video on the experience between Verily and Verb. We talk about leadership. Scott Hunnekens talks about the organization. We talk about why the organization is interesting workout. We deployed all of this in a media-rich environment, and the question always comes up when I talk about where do you do that? But the problem when I try and answer that is this is where the confusion begins. Arguably, the white space to crack is understanding the difference between social deployment and business deployment on the internet. It is not social media, it is the internet. For some reason, the 55 to 60-year-old person running the organizations today has already judged that social media is not an area that we're going to work in. because that's what my 13-year-old nurse is taking selfies on. And I'm not going to lower my brand there. They're already judging it. They're dismissing these platforms before even trying to deploy on it with any level of intelligence. And they think deploying on it for 30 days and nothing happened, tried that, didn't work. Why don't you tell that to your marketing department or sales department? I mean, hiring is nothing more than a marketing and sales role. You lay out your marketing messaging, you build an awareness around your organization, you get your A players to lean in and consider, and then you have your sales team come on and take over the execution of the close. There's a lot more to it, but it really is fundamentally that. And when we talked earlier about a platform like LinkedIn, it is by far the most amazing, fascinating marketing tool for talent acquisition of all time. And it has nothing to do with job postings. So you've got leadership at the top who's dismissing this and is never really deployed at all on this. And they're blurring the lines. Here's why. Who in here has a LinkedIn account? Put your hands up. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. I need honesty. If you have a Facebook account, a couple hands went down. Most of them stayed up. How many of you, all hands down? Simon says, all hands down. How many of you, at one time or another in your life, said, I am never going to be on Facebook? Hands up. Yeah, right. See, so you are playing on a social, you are playing on LinkedIn, you're the same human being, but your behaviors on both are tremendously different. If you had LinkedIn and Facebook open on your phone or your desktop, how you respond is going to be incredibly different on LinkedIn versus Facebook, but you are on the digital platforms making decisions. And deploying your messaging there effectively is the key. So we're going to get tactical here. Current practices. We'll run through this quick. We've talked about this. The job posting. Basically, and I apologize for this, but I've been watching from the 50-yard line for 27 years. People are terrible at job postings. They're basically recipes. And they're cut and paste, and I bet you if you can carbon date them, it was the same cut and paste that was deployed 27 years ago, only somebody typed it up, cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste, must be able to carry 50 pounds. Seriously. That is what you're putting out there, and because you deploy it electronically, you think that you're doing it digitally. And all you're doing is posting and praying that somebody out there answers it. That's maybe good enough. It is true, isn't it? It's true, thank you. It's true, I came here to speak the truth. I won't be back next year, but I came here to speak the truth. You post, you pray, and you wait. And you wait, and 90% of the people who are A players aren't responding anyway to that. And your only other hope is the people who have a stake in the hiring process make a call to their friends, and maybe they're good enough. And again, I will tell you, when I see hires in the greater Boston area, and we keep a real close track on that, and I see who's hired, I at times have to go, there were 4 other people who were available for that gig who they could have got that were better than that. But you didn't know how to access them. You didn't know how to have them following you 24/7, 365 in your organization. You were not deploying a marketing strategy across the rails. But the CEO thinks he or she is being really powerful and digital because they posted it online. When in essence, what they're really doing is creating more white noise and putting people to sleep. So right now you execute from a majority of you on the 30-day, 45-day post and pray. You do not pay attention to the digital storytelling. If you could start paying more attention to that, that's where we move into Precruit. We basically took the characteristics of search over our almost 3 decades and said, what are we doing to get people's attention? How do we get their attention? Now that's one-to-one. One phone call, one conversation. How do I deploy that at scale? And this is a non-headhunting presentation. I want to put headhunting out of business because I can. in the purest sense, just like a quality person should end up putting themselves out of business. It never happens, but that's the goal for those that run ops. But when you get involved in an effective digital storytelling proposition, you create awareness at a scale that's much more than a one-to-one basis based on the scale of the headhunter. Giovanni is a much better headhunter than somebody else in my firm. He's able to convert a lot quicker on the searches. Holly, who you all know, is a masterful messenger and facilitator of the process for those of you in here that have been placed or worked with her. But you can't count on that. You can't afford them. But at scale, what you can do is create messaging in your organization that at scale tells your story 24/7, 365, deployed on a platform. Currently, the platform is LinkedIn, Indeed, and some others, not even your webpage. You'll hear me not talk about your webpage at all. Why would you build a store out in the middle of Iowa when the whole party is taking place downtown? Yet most people have their strategy, if anything at all, deployed on their webpage exclusively. Think about that for a moment. So, the difference. Here's where I get so upset at leadership. Talent acquisition in a legacy world is not HR's full responsibility. Yet anything that has to do with the pulse that goes inside the four walls of an organization over the years has been kicked over there. Seriously has. There's an administrative side to it, and there's an execution side. Telling the story is leadership side. However, HR oftentimes is looked at as, and I'm telling you this, and you know this, as a Swiss Army knife within an organization. It's asked to do a million things, being one tool, and is not allowed to or empowered to do them all in an excellent fashion. They're all compromised. Does anybody here cut a 2x4 with their Swiss Army knife? Has anybody ever opened up the wine bottle with their Swiss Army knife? Has anybody tried to turn a screw in their engine box with a Swiss Army knife? But everybody has ones. When we bought it, paid $140 for it, and it's sitting in the kitchen drawer right in the back there. It's not the best tool to try and do everything. What has to happen on talent acquisition is TA has to be broken out from falling under HR. I'm not suggesting HR loses it, but what I mean is leadership has to identify that if I'm going to find the best people in the marketplace today, I've got to make that an entirely separate function and outfit it and deploy it appropriately. HR is overworked, HR is under-resourced, and they're poorly trained in current talent acquisition. Because every single one of the HR people in this room and probably in Boston have grown up in a world that's tremendously different than the 20 to 35-year-old you're trying to reach. And the money that you ask for in order to deploy your strategy on this, when you want to deploy it on this, is often poo-pooed because it's expensive to do it the right way the first time. Like everything else, when you tool up for a brand new line or a brand new product, those non-recurring costs are maddening. And when it's looked on a budget line, if you're running an organization, they say, what do you mean $300,000 for a talent acquisition reset? Having said that, you dramatically increase the people who come in your organization to interview and find out about the opportunities when you do that. Said it earlier, classic HR has been always relegated to playing defense. Talent acquisition is straight up West Coast offense. It's invasive activity. It's reaching out into the market, telling a story aggressively. I want to jump into this part because I want to get into the digital storytelling as quick as possible, respecting Tom's time. Here's an example. I'm going to go a little more granular on this. With Verb Surgical, we came in and in order to facilitate their platform, we went to LinkedIn and designed, some of you may know this, some of you may not. You can deploy on LinkedIn a initial page that a software engineer lands on, a mechanical engineer lands on, a quality engineer lands on, a regulatory, catered, personalized to them. So if I saw a head twist, if I am a software engineer going across LinkedIn, wanting to dig in further because I saw some of your postings about your organization or the lives you're saving, and I clicked on that LinkedIn to go to ABC company. Did you know, this is tactical stuff now, did you know that you can cater that view specifically to the ME or the software person and make it robust and personalized to them rather than the generic stuff that everybody puts on there and just hopes that throwing it all on the wall catches somebody's attention? You can deploy personalized video. I'm not going to play this whole video, but this is an example also, but you can do this with an iPhone. This is high production stuff with my great team.
So what attracted me to Verb Surgical was kind of the unique opportunity to really be a part of something that was starting and see that transition into a product that's eventually going to launch to market is something that really attracted me. Being able to, really get my foot in the door and have a hand in something that could be and will be the future of surgery. So going into medical devices, I expected maybe a bit more of a hierarchy. Not only, kind of across the board is everyone's input taken into account, but being, even a very young member.
CTO of Verily, trying to counter that it's not going to be.
The relationship is extremely close. As you know, the Verily software engineers have Google DNA, some of the best software engineers in the world. The thing that excites them about working with Verily and with Verb is that there's fundamentally new information that we're extracting from the human body and from the operating.
So that, when you get an A player coming to your page, and again, just an example, and having that information engaging, has them dig a little deeper, do a little further diligence than a job posting. Sure, that's a high production piece. I don't even want to say what the budget is we deployed, but we probably saved the organization hundreds of thousands of dollars by deploying this digital strategy. In the near term and in the long term retention, which we'll jump into in a minute, it really impacts it, because what you're getting is you're getting people who really want to come there and have the full download on the diligence. Let's jump into Precruiting. This is not a commercial for TMG. This is a word that we believe we are persuading people before you recruit them. That's simply what we're doing. We're setting the table. Your organization wants to set the table to persuade people and set them up to see your organization for what it is. Generally speaking, organizations play in this area. Now, I get it, there's always reactionary hiring, always. But usually in that 30 to 45 day area, somebody says, oh crap, we need that quality engineer. Ooh, we need that C++ engineer. And everybody scrambles, does the copy and paste, puts it out, and sits and waits. Generally speaking, that's the activity. Having said that, we're sitting down with clients right now a year out, and within 70 to 80% certainty, we can tag out when they want to make those hires. And then we start deploying a strategy 3, 4, 5 months in advance, laying down a narrative around their organization. Let's think about simple physics here. If I give one team 120 days to find an A player, and let that market know in 120 days I'm making that hire, keep your eyes peeled, here's some information about us, and I give the other team a 30-day window, who's going to end up with a better slate of candidates? Right? Who's going to end up with it? When we come in, we have our clients, you can do this, you develop an ongoing hiring narrative that's running 24/7, 365 in the most robust network that people are going to nearly every other day, is what the stat is, and looking at what's going on in their industry, and you have a steady state deployment messaging with the intention of talent acquisition. You deploy that in there with your 4 pillars. Articles, photos, videos, podcast. what you do is you create an awareness around your organization. When you do this, it's as simple as this. When I send out information, here's mission information, here's leadership information. These are either articles or podcasts or short videos done on iPhone. We call them Gorilla iPhone. And then I deploy information, again, leadership, market. Let's take structural heart valves. Let's talk about using aortic heart valve catheter system and how big that market is. And then I lay in there my product or service. While I'm in there and people are getting content and getting educated about things, and I'm giving them value, I deploy in the middle of that. By the way, in 3 months, we're going to be looking for a product development engineer and a project management person. Stay tuned. If I deploy that 30 days out, the odds of everybody's lives being able to execute on that and being inconvenienced is a lot less likely than if I deploy this and say, listen, in about 120 days, our firm is going to be looking for this. The individual is now going to watch your feed over the next 30, 60, 90 days and watch that information that comes out. Is this a lot of work? Darn yes, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Once you set it up, though, go visit the Mullings Group LinkedIn page, mine individually. We are deploying, the initial non-recurring efforts are large, but when you take into account the amount of headhunting fees you're going to kill, the time to hire, the cost per hire, the more robust interviews, and more importantly, the attraction of the A players who move the needle, it is a no-brainer. You have to start thinking that you're a catheter company who's a little bit of a media company. You're a bypass company who's a little bit of a media company. That mindset. Inform the individuals. This is the key, diligence. A players want to do diligence. If you do not give an A player enough information to do diligence, you will not get them. And that's where most of the searches or most of the engagement in the marketplace falls short today. They want information to do diligence. Yet there's still behavior out there today. Companies are saying, what do you mean you don't want the offer? We did a telephone interview with you, and we did two-hour interviews. What do you mean you don't want to come here? Seriously, that's what happens today. Imagine deploying via a link or an email that they can get to on their time when they're sitting with their cup of tea on Saturday and say, oh, right, I was talking to Steph about that. Let me see what she sent me. And I sit there and I have meaningful content deployed and answering those 4 pillars. And I can access it again and again and again. We're all old enough in here. I'm 55. You can't tell me how old you are because this is an HR meeting. I'm 55. The first couple cars I bought that were new when I was in my 30s, I walked out of the car dealership with that brochure. I swore I wasn't going to buy one. I was like this. I'm like, yeah, I'll take the brochure. And I got home and I put it on the counter. And I looked at like the different colors you can buy, and I walked away. Went outside, cut the grass, came back in. It was still on the counter. I had dinner. I sat down. I read it. I bought the goddamn car. But if I would have sat on that lot exclusively, and Carl, the car salesman, gave me his message, and I walked off, and I had no takeaway, unless I was super motivated, I wasn't buying. Diligence. Diligence, diligence, diligence. How many of you are spending an enormous amount of time providing diligence in the marketplace, in an open market, to people you don't even know yet, because that's where the A players are? That is the message I want you to walk away with today, providing a tremendous amount of diligence and putting that one-time, non-recurring effort up front to get it on its rails. That gets you truer yeses and truer nos. My HR people are going to be super happy when I only have to get 4 interviews instead of 17 interviews, because the people who stepped up either opted out early and they never made it to the table because what they saw and the information that I was giving to them didn't vibe with what they wanted. But the ones who did step in because they were fired up by what they saw and they weren't looking anyway, and I gave it to them to do it from a distance, they're fired up. And they get in that interview, and my interview processes are humming. I'm no longer spending a lot of time going through the resume, rereading it back to them, and asking a couple silly questions, and then jumping to a behavioral-based question. When you give candidates an enormous amount of information about your company, interviews change dramatically. How many times have you had interviews and you just dismissed the person because they did no homework? A lot. That's your fault. Hate to tell you, that's your fault. You're the one who put the ad out. You've got to give a massive amount of information. And then people can't fake it in an interview, but it makes a better interview process. And you get a truer look at the person. You put out the ad, and you expect people to do the homework, and you think that shows initiative. Not in today's world. I'm sorry. You've got to give it to them to review. If they don't review it, fine. They're not going to come in on the interview. But if they review the information and they step up on the interview, what an interview process you have. And then probably the most underexplored data point in corporate today is retention. All of you have been part of a high-performing team here. When you write the word win, there are 3 words that come to mind: speed, accuracy, and cohesiveness of the team. Those 3 things. Speed, accuracy, cohesiveness. You put a team of Navy SEALs together, they get stuff done. One player on that team bails at a point in the project that was not expected, and you lose them because it wasn't the place they thought it was. Because when you hired them 18 months ago, they really didn't have the ability to do all the diligence, but once they got behind the scenes, it wasn't quite the gig they thought they signed up for, and they've been looking for 9 months, and they've been a less than optimal employee, and they walk out the door one day and they catch you slack-jawed. You avoid that quite a bit more when you allow them to do a tremendous amount of diligence up front, because you end up hiring the right person. And it just doesn't cost you a $50,000 search fee to replace that person. I've got some friends in here in startups. If I lose a key player because it wasn't quite the gig they signed up for, but it was my fault I didn't give them disclosure, and they leave, and I've got a $100,000 a month burn rate, or a $300,000 a month burn rate, now I'm on my heels, that's a really expensive person to lose, where if you had provided better diligence up front, you would have retained them. This is where I think search and TA is going to change dramatically. Engagement. Here's the key, guys. This is why our firm is so successful. And I do think there's going to be something evolving in the next few years in corporate. I think what you're going to see is we get all the way down the pipeline to these A players feeding them all this information, and you're going to play this back in 2 or 3 years, and it's going to be the truth. I think you're going to put out great content. I think you're going to put out tremendous information on the hiring narrative. I think you're going to get a lot of people engaged. But until you give them a place to lean in safely without getting outed, you're not going to get a crack at everybody you should. Because the A player is not going to send in the resume no matter what. But there's got to be a stop-off where they can explore without being outed. That's what our search firm does. That's what all search firms do. They can explore it to the nth degree with us before they step over the line, because I sit in that every day. I've built that house for 27 years, 5,000 placements, 40,000 deals. I don't close every deal. But there's going to be created in some progressive organization, and it might be sitting in here today, that there will be a place that individuals can lean in without deploying their resume. And it may very well be just their LinkedIn profile that's out in the public domain anyway. Therefore, there's not a body of evidence. If you go to our website, we don't take resumes anymore. We only take your LinkedIn URL, because that can get picked up by anybody. But what about creating a safe place for people to say, look, I'm not quite convinced yet. Who can I talk to? I just had an individual in the audience here tell me about a process he went through, got on the phone with HR, and he had some junior HR person on the phone with him. And he said, I got a couple questions for you. And the junior HR person's like, well, I really can't answer any questions. But how about having process in place where you can have that VP of sales say, I know I got to spend 3 hours this week on those 4 TIs, telephone interviews. I'm not dissing HR here, but a candidate who's looking for a VP of sales, a director of sales role, doesn't want to talk to HR. Sorry. Wants to talk to the person who they're going to be reporting to. And so the second you give that individual a chance to lean in, what's already out in the public domain, you have a dialogue with them in a safe place and say, I don't want your resume until we have a conversation, then we'll set up a cup of coffee. Yeah, that's entirely different than the way you're doing it today, but sorry, that's the way it's going, because that's the way the search business has been for a long time. And the organizations that hack that and figure out how to do that, and the CEO who says that's what you're going to do, Mr. VP and Mrs. VP, is going to win. Because if the CEO ties compensation to behavior, all of a sudden talent acquisition becomes a very important situation versus reactionary when the pain is high. But that safe place really is a key. The process, I don't have time to get into the process here, but I just wanted to show you something. Typically, most companies revolve their process around this, and they believe this is where you lose or win a deal on a candidate. I will tell you that that's how many there are. When we interact with an individual, every single one of those are more important than the salary conversation. That is where deals fall apart. You just don't know because you don't have an intimacy with the candidate pool that we do. That needs to be handled, and that's next year's presentation, Tom, but that needs to be handled critically. So fixing it, a couple takeaways today. The first thing is go out there and do the work first. Your competition is going to do it eventually. But if you hit it first and you pull this off, and you have your leadership actually commit to this, your TA changes, the energy in your firm changes, your ability in HR to really move the needle with talent, with new tools changes dramatically. Define your hiring requirements a lot earlier and deploy meaningful activities earlier and deploy your hiring narrative 3, 4, 5 months in advance. If you have something that you know you need hired in December, you're already too late right now. Why would I not deploy software engineer required December 2017? Here's the cool projects you're working on. If you're interested now, cool, let us know. Otherwise, stay tuned over the next 6 months about the type of stuff we do. I'm not looking, but as a rock star A guy, I lose nothing by watching what's going on. Does that make sense? Get the plan, get it started. It doesn't always come down to massive amounts of money. There are many ways to create an awareness, inform, get a candidate to lean in, create that safe place, engage them, get them in the process. You can do it, short ideas. You can do the guerrilla videos on here. You don't even have to do videos. You can start just deploying information in the public domain. You can interview key players in your organization. People want to know what it's like there, who will I work with, what do the hallways look like. Document versus produce. Do not curate video. Do not. It'll be the quickest tell that you're working too hard to the people who are looking at it. One of the things we're working on right now, and Ryan doesn't want to do it, but we're going to do it, is we're going to have a TMG/client phone that every week, if I've got a hiring initiative going on, who's got the mechanical engineer phone this week? And what they're going to do is, in a world they live in, they're going to be taking videos all week of what it's like to be an ME here. And they're going to shoot it to us. We're going to clip it up. My 11-year-old can edit it. And you deploy it. And then people are going to be like, I'm going to watch this. What's going on this week? And I'm going to watch that. Because that's what people are doing here anyway. They're not reading your postings. News alert, punchline. The future is definitely here. Some of you are just not, or your leadership is just not choosing to play in it. Thanks. Tom, how are we? Quick questions. I want to respect.
Right, and then we've got a panel before we're ready, so.
Okay. 1 or 2 questions at all? Anybody want to poke at that? Please poke at that. Too much for you.
I'm going to kind of flip the table.
Go.
I want to say, how do we create more A players?
How do we create more A players? That's a longer range question, and that's people development. And so for today, it's talent acquisition, the conversation. So your definition of A player is different than other organizations, right? So that's 1. And 2 is, I'm not sure you need more A players. I think you need to do a better job of attracting the A players. There are tons of A players out there, and everything is a reference point. But good question. Making more A players, a little bit of a long range play. Accessing the A players, there's a ton of them out there. You just got to know how to attract them, create an awareness around your organization and your opportunity, and then launch it from there. Questions? Yes?
I'd like to get a little more granular.
Yeah.
So as an HR person that's been recruiting,
Yeah.
enticing people
Sure.
for years now, where are we losing the A players? What are we saying or doing when we get them?
You're not telling them what they're getting. So the question is, where are we losing the A players? First of all, the A players aren't really looking at the postings. So you're not creating an entertaining awareness. Once you get them on the phone, there's not enough education going on as to what are you going to get. Because what happens is the first engagement typically is, tell me about your background, tell me about your experience here, tell me about your experience there. People hire people to solve problems. It's that simple. If you don't start out your engagement with the individual about talking about the problem you're trying to solve, instead of the specs you think you need to solve the problem, you lose them. The A player, they love to solve problems. Every A player is bored out of that gourd and they leave your company when the problems are no longer there. You've had those exit interviews. So what you need to do is your immediate engagement is, Susie, great to have you on the phone. Thanks for taking the time. This is a 15-minute call. I reviewed your background, super interesting. Let me tell you what we're trying to get done with this role. And with that, we think you're going to get A, B, and C here. And by the way, the peers you're working with, because everybody wants to know who they're working with, I don't know if you had a chance to check out Bob, Sally, and Carl's background, but they'll be peers of yours. They came here because they didn't want to sit at GE anymore, an ABC company. And by the way, I'm more than happy to give you a chance to chat with them in the process. That needs to be the first point of engagement versus you interrogating them about their resume. They want to know what is the problem you're trying to solve. And this is why we think you need an MBA, a BS, OUS, launch experience, blah, 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 versus we're looking for this, because then you lose them. Tell them about what they're going to get first. Does that help? Questions?
I'm curious, what are you seeing with some of the organizations that are adapting more the proactive sort of advanced search with the compliance part of reporting for like EEO reporting, or what kind of candidate pool are we attracting to kind of, how do they balance that to evidence it? Because I almost feel like, same with healthcare, right? Is like, we're trying to advance the way we do things, but yet our systems are so backwards in terms of how they, you know, compliance and regulatorily.
So the question is, how do you make sure, again, this is what drives me nuts, right, is how do we defend ourselves and make sure we don't upset anybody, right? So one of the things we've been doing is make sure where you deploy your messaging checks the boxes for the EEOC. So let's just say, for argument's sake, I want to deploy it on a female-centric board. I want to demonstrate it, I deployed it in this area. The beauty of having the content is you can deploy it anywhere you want. You can direct those guns anywhere, and then you can show evidence-based that you tried to deploy it on these areas, and these are just the candidates who came in. So I love the mindset of how do we do that versus I can't. Question? Challenge? Ant, you got anything? Holly, my team want to add anything to that? Good? Awesome. Thanks, guys.